Good morning, everybody.
Morning, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Good. So how much snow did y'all get?
You know, that I don't know. What ended up being on the ground, Tom, was probably a couple inches. But it
Oh, okay.
didn't, a lot of it didn't stick. I mean, it would come down in sheets, and then it would flurry and come down in sheets, flurry and come down in sheets. Uh, some, some spots got up to 4 or 5 inches. My house, I'm about 3,000 feet, maybe a little bit higher, somewhere around that that elevation. We had a couple inches on the ground, but I think if it all would have stuck, it would have been a doozy.
Huh. We got nothing. Not a drop. Not a drop of rain. Not a bit of. Not a single flake. Nothing.
Huh?
At my house, our housetop got covered, and in spots on my road, it was starting to get slick.
And you're in
Really?
Campbell, right?
I'm in Clover, Virginia, in Halifax County.
Okay. I don't know where that is. Uh,
Like where South Boston.
okay. My wife worked in South Boston for a little bit. You know Dr. Burnett, the dermatologist there.
I think so.
He's there behind the hospital.
Yes.
She worked with him, and so she worked there about a year. And so on weekends, I'd either go out there or she would come home. So, I got to know some of the communities out in that area. I even ran into some of the students that I had at the time out there, running around, like going to Tractor Supply. I think one of the girls worked at Tractor Supply and stuff. But I don't think I ever went to Clover. All
But
right.
yeah, where I live there in below Martinsville, we got nothing. Like I said, not a
Well, I
thing.
knew you lived below Martinsville. Uh, Keith, did you get any snow?
No, just a little flurries yesterday and a lot of cold weather. And went on my
All right.
bees yesterday, checked on them, and got stung all over my neck, but that's okay. But
Hold on a
I went.
second. My dean's calling.
Uh-oh. I opened the thing up to look at them, man. They came out at me with vengeance. Stung me all on my neck right here.
They're mad at you for letting it get so cold. They're blaming you.
You
Well,
get
that's probably
stung
they're probably
bad?
let the heat up.
You get stung bad?
Yeah, I did something stupid. I just kind of went to check on the hive, and I didn't think I thought it was so cold. I didn't know they would come out with vengeance. They kissed me all over my neck. So I've got about a size 24 neck this morning. So anyway, but I went to a bee meeting in Chatham, Virginia, and a guy sitting next to me was from Abington. And I mentioned your name, and he spoke very highly of you. He says you're the best horse trainer in the state. His name was, I believe, was Tim Weiner. I think, if I remember correctly, that was his
No,
name.
I don't know him. But that is
He's,
real nice. That's a heck of a compliment.
he said you, oh my gosh, you were in business and you closed it down about 2 years ago. You broke a horse that he had, or something. I forgot what all the details. But he says you're not training anymore. He misses it.
Well, I am training. I don't like to break colts anymore. I got hurt pretty bad this spring. I realized that age is starting to catch up with me.
Come look at me.
But I'm still training, and I'm trying to place him. Uh, he must have got a horse that I trained for somebody else.
Yeah,
The
he
name
says about
doesn't
two.
ring a
He said
bell.
about 2 years ago. Now the thing, it might have been Wagner or Weiner. I can't.
Okay, all right. Now you change the last name to Wagner, it's a different ballgame.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
my memory doesn't work as well as it used to.
yeah. I am. I still train horses. I just don't break colts.
Okay.
Uh, but that's one heck of a compliment. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Okay. And I have a course related question. I was looking over the stuff here and um, reading all about the regulation stuff. When you're doing the Disabilities Act and you look at it, it says all reasonable accommodation for a disabled person. Who determines that? I mean, if you had a business on the second floor and one of your trusted workers fell off a horse and was now partially paralyzed, would you have to put an elevator in? Say if you had stairs before. I mean, who determines the cost factor and something like that?
Gosh, Tom, you want to help me out here? I know Dr. Leon Geyer would say, the law goes within, with the prudent and reasonable person.
And that is
But,
exactly the phrase that went through my mind. But the sort of oh, go ahead.
I guess in a way, I know when I was a county extension agent and I worked in the courthouse, or our office was at the court, in government offices, and we had an elevator, and we were just on the second floor. The building had an elevator in it, and when that thing broke down, boy, we got a lot of heat. Social services was on the second floor, and boy, they sure took a lot of heat because people couldn't get up there. Uh, I don't, you know, I really don't know.
Which sort of my understanding is, I mean, it's a little bit, I think, think about the reasonableness. It's a little bit going to depend on the business. You have to make accommodations for somebody with a handicap as long as it's reasonable and not going to be to the financial detriment of your business. Like for your B business, you're only making a couple $1,000s a year, so you can't afford to put in a $50,000 elevator. That wouldn't be reasonable. That would kill your business. You would be exempt. Where the courthouse he's talking about, where they probably got a $5 million budget, it would make sense. It wouldn't be unfair to expect them to put in the elevator. But
right, and that's
it's gonna be a case by case basis. But ordinary, reasonable, prudent. What would an ordinary, reasonable person think would be a reasonable accommodation? Wheelchair ramp. Yeah, that would be reasonable. You can do that a couple $100s. But an elevator, that might be for a small business, that might not be reasonable.
So would a business, would they go to the disability folks and said, my employee wants this put in, and I don't feel like I can't afford it, or is this one of these things that the employee sues the employer and says you're not accommodating my handicap?
In today's society, Keith, Tom and I we're going to quote several times our former professor, Dr. Leon Geyer. My hat's off to him. Because the law is based when decisions are made on what a reasonable and prudent person would do. Okay? Unfortunately, in today's society, I think we have lost some of that, especially within, all these crazy lawsuits and people suing over the least little things and actually winning. Uh, in looking at it, with the reasonable and prudent person, what they would do, I think Tom is right. That if it would be a detriment to your business, especially if you don't own the building. If you just rent an office up there on the second floor and the owner of the building, I think that would be his responsibility or their responsibility to have an elevator in there, especially, if it's all open for the public. Uh, my brother's a lawyer and he has his own building, or he bought a house that he set his office up in. And there's a basement, there's a first floor, there's a second floor. And his office is upstairs. And he has a wheelchair ramp going in the main but he has no elevator to get to his office. He does have a conference room on the first floor. So, I mean, in my eyes, he made a prudent and reasonable effort to put in, the receptionist and a conference room on that first floor for people in wheelchairs, so they could move, what paper they need, use a computer downstairs in the conference room. But in the case where you're renting renting an office space on the second floor and there's not an elevator in there, if you're renting, then it's not your deal to put the elevator in there. That would be the owner of the building, in my mind.
Okay.
But how it would hold up in court nowadays, I have no clue.
Okay.
I know that doesn't answer your question.
Well, my take on all this is all we've done is open up a Pandora's box for lawyers to become rich or richer.
Yes, always.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. And this goes back to what this Pandora's box that you're opening up. It goes back to a reasonable and prudent person. Of being aware of some of these laws and documenting everything you do to cover yourself. And then when you have questions, that you consult a lawyer, because that's what a reasonable and prudent person would do.
And as Dwayne suggested a couple minutes ago, what is a reasonable assumption that a reasonable person would make? That's a moving target. Because you and I, Dwayne, we're old enough that we would think, well, a cup of hot coffee, that's kind of hot. But then you had that lady that ended up suing McDonald's and won because the cup of coffee didn't say warning hot contents inside the cup.
Right.
And that was something that Dr. Geyer, one of the biggest things that I had, and I'm sure they had it when Dwayne was there, but ultimately, you can't assume that people could read.
Right.
And that's kind of a thing, because when we got to talk about trespassing, and we're like, we don't want people coming up there with their motorbikes riding on our farm, so we ought to be able to string a cable across of course you have somebody there, I'm going to string a cable across between a couple trees, and when they come in there with their motorcycles, I'm going to clothesline them or something like that. And as long as I got that no trespassing sign, I'm covered. But no, you can't assume that they could read. And so, but normally you would a normal person can read, but you can't make that assumption anymore. So you kind of got to dial it back a little bit. So when I'm assuming what would a reasonable person do, I sort of put it, what would a reasonable 10-year-old think when it comes to some of these common sense kind of things. But
and I still don't understand the hot coffee deal. Even a
No.
10-year-old knows hot chocolate is hot.
Yes, I don't get that one either, bud.
But anyway, or the icy sidewalk is icy, inclement weather.
But you can take my business law classes
That's
if you
an
want
act
more.
of God, and you have gone out there and you've scraped and you've salted, and somebody still slips and falls and sues you. You had the act of God with that weather deal, but you scraped and you salted, but it's so cold it hasn't really affected it. That happens. I think that reasonable, prudent person is sometimes out of the internal vortex of his or her. Aaron, you doing all right today?
Yes, sir. I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing fine, thanks. All right, guys, I've got your job descriptions, got them graded, and sent you emails back for whatever changes. Unless you got 100% on it, I told you what you could change to increase your score. And if you want to redo it, Send it back to me. I'll regrade it and change your grade. Um, so I did send you an email. Jasmine, I got yours. I think I responded to yours last week, and I sent you one. Got yours graded this morning, Aaron and Carrie, the online student, and I sent y'all a response on where I took off points. And Aaron, if you don't mind me singling you out, uh, you left off about your territory, where your store is and the counties it covered. And I took off 2 points for that, but everything else you were spot on. I think, still ended up as an A. So if you want to redo it, add that. That's fine. If you don't, I understand. It's still an A. And Jasmine, you had an A as well. Like I think yours was like a 90%. If you want some extra points, you can redo it. Early in the semester, those extra points may help you out. That's up to you and y'all's schedule. So that's fine.
Did you get the one that I sent back with the corrections on it?
Can you resend that? Would that be a trouble? Because I know I replied to you and I couldn't. Well, I pulled it up and I looked at it and I'm thinking, is this the one I graded or not? And I didn't really put a lot of time in. I was trying to get Aaron and Carrie's graded. But I'll take a look at it again. You sent that Thursday, right? And I responded, I'm going to be out of town because of the funeral.
Yes.
Okay, I'll look at that again. I got it. I'll pull it up and I'll grade it. I couldn't remember
Okay.
if that was the same one or not. So
Okay.
I'll take care of it. Thank you for clarifying that for me. I was going to ask you about it. Okay, guys. This weekend or this Sunday, your job announcement's due. Okay? The job announcement's going to be fairly easy compared to your job description. I think the two hardest ones you got to do are the job description and your interview plan, your questions in the discrimination section. The job announcement is one of the easiest ones to do in my opinion. So what you're going to do, if we look at, I think I might have gone over this the other day. I don't remember. It's been a whirlwind for me since about Wednesday when I found out my cousin's wife died. Ended up trying to get out everything took care of at the farm so that it made my wife's life easier because she stayed back to feed everything. And then I took off Friday morning. We went to Cleveland, and then I got home probably about 1 or 2 o'clock Sunday morning. So anyway, so this your advertisement or what you're probably going to what most students usually do is have a paragraph that says the specific geographic area they're looking for in the job search. So like with Jasmine and Keith, I think you're both looking for somebody part-time. So that's probably going to be a local job search, within the county. Something that it's going to be worth driving to for the money they're earning. Somebody's not going to move in for that position. For Carrie and Aaron, who's advertising for a full-time job, Carrie's looking for a manager position, so she may go more outside of the local area. She may be looking in a regional or statewide area. Aaron's looking for a full-time job, a full-time worker. Um, he's probably going to be within a 2 or 3 county area. And then if that doesn't work, he'd expand his search out. I don't know with what his job is, if it's going to be, if it would warrant doing a multi-state or a national search for somebody to move in for that position. Does that make sense? Although, a recent college grad probably would be interested in your job, I would think. It's a good entry level job with potential to grow within that organization. So, uh, you know, but anyway, you want to specify the geographic area you're going to look at your job search, states, counties, or national. So be specific on that. Include the newspapers, magazines, radio stations, or any other methods of advertising. So, if you put it in the magazines, say, if you're looking for a dairy herd manager, you put it in Horde's Dairy Herd. If you're doing a national search, that goes all over the country. The Virginia Employment Commission, your website, if your company has a website or listed on Indeed or whatever, wherever you're advertising, make sure you list it. Then you're going to have a brief paragraph for that advertisement that can be used in the newspaper. Remember, newspapers, magazines charge you per word. So you want to give a brief description of the job and their next step. How are they going? If you just advertise a dog groomer and I'm interested in that, how do I apply? What's my next step? Do I send you a resume? And how do I send that to you? Does that make sense? And then just make sure your spelling's correct. It looks nice. Easy 22 points.
Did you get my job announcement I emailed to you?
I'll have to look. I got it, but I haven't rated it yet.
Okay. Just change gears. I noticed next week we have our first exam.
Yep, I was getting ready to mention that as well. We have an exam scheduled for next week. So let's plan on Thursday, February the 9th. Is that okay with you guys, or do you rather have it on a Tuesday?
No, that's fine with me.
Okay. If you have a bunch of other exams scheduled that day, I don't want to overload you.
I think Tom's exam is on Tuesday, so I think we're good.
Okay.
Well, my 143 exam is this Thursday, actually.
Oh, this Thursday. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Good thing you clarified that there, Aaron.
Yep.
My worst nightmare, my reoccurring nightmare, my 4 years at Virginia Tech and my 2 years at Nebraska was walking into class and having an exam and thinking it was the next class period.
Which, Dwayne, I'll try to get that test sent out hopefully this afternoon, actually, if not tomorrow morning.
Okay, and I'll put it in the testing center for Greg and Evan. So anyway, we'll plan on next Thursday for that exam. Okay, guys, we have any questions over anything we've covered at this point? All right. If not, we'll kind of do a quick thing of what we went over last week. We talked about promotions. We clarified our terminology to make sure we're all on the same page with promotions, job transfers and rotations, a demotion and layoffs. And then we talked a lot about how, you know, whether you have a seniority-based system in your organization or a merit-based system. And we compared advantages to promotion with seniority versus merit. Seniority is based on length of service. Basically, you enter in at the lowest work level, and with overtime, you work your way up. Your merit-based is based on worth and the worker's productivity and abilities, and their relevant qualifications and their past performance. So basically, we talked about advantages of seniority and disadvantages, and we talked about the advantages of a merit-based system, and we talked about the disadvantages of a merit-based system, and particularly we talked about that with promotions. So understand, make sure your workers understand up front how the promotions work, if you're seniority based or merit based. Another advantage of a merit-based promotional system is it gives you, the employer, more options when there's vacancies to be filled. I don't know if we discussed that one or not, but it is one. Now layoffs, we said that they were due to lack of work. It's not based on production. It's just lack of work for those workers. And we see that a lot in agriculture with, a lot of jobs are seasonal. When the tobacco season's growing season's over, we would lay people off. Or once we got all the tobacco graded and sold, we laid a bunch of people off. So if you're hiring seasonal workers, make sure it's clear that at the end of the summer or the end of the season, that's the end of the job. What makes that hard, guys, is a partial layoff. One of the things that we did at Stewart's, and luckily Stewart's was a merit-based deal instead of promotion, instead of a seniority. We hired several people. I wouldn't really call them seasonal workers. We would hire a few people at the beginning of tobacco season to help with the planting. Actually, we hired a lot when we raised our own plants to help pull plants, and one group of people be in the beds pulling plants, and then a few of the people be out helping the regular employees plant or transplant those plants. Then when we went to buying, and then after everything was planted, everybody's jobs ended. We might have sometimes we kept a few of those employees, a few of those part-time people, just for summer help. Usually they were high school kids. And we'd have them doing odd jobs, and then when there was stuff to do in the tobacco, that's what they had to go do. Typically when we talked, we didn't hire any other people, just the few seasonal people we kept. But then when we started to to harvest the tobacco, cutting and spearing and hanging in the barns. We would hire a temporary crew to come in and help us out to get that done. Once that was done, the majority of them were laid off, or that was it. They knew once the tobacco was hung in the barn, they were done. We made it plain to them. And again, some of those part-time people had been with us all summer. We kept a few of those on to help us with the grading. Sometimes we turned them loose, sometimes we kept them. It just depended on a lot of factors: money, their ability, their schedule to come help us because school was starting back. But I remember one year we had hired several people, and we ended up keeping them throughout the summer. And tobacco and through the grading of tobacco, and we finished all that up probably around Christmas time, or a little bit before Christmas. And my boss had me over, called me over one evening after work, the general manager of the farm, or the CEO of it, and then my general manager, and we had dinner. And he told me, he said, "Dwayne, we're going to have a layoff. I've got to choose between I've got to choose to keep one employee and get rid of a few others." And he named names, and he said, "You've worked with them. What is your opinion?" And guys, that's a tough boat to be in. One of these guys that we were thinking of the names that was mentioned, had a wife and kids. One of the guys was just single, and the other guy had a wife and kids. And when you've got to decide which one, or they're wanting your opinion and the reason why you decide to keep person A over person B and C, that's tough. It's not an easy decision to make, especially when two of the people have dependents. And that's a real life story. Which one do you let go? Do you keep one of those with the family to help them support their family? Do you keep the best worker? What do you think? What's your opinion? How would you have handled it?
Personally, I don't think the personal life interferes. It should be their performance on the job.
Okay. I went with your feeling.
Yeah.
I made my recommendation to keep the best worker. And that was a guy that was single, that didn't have a wife or kids. And I went with him. I'll just tell you why I decided to go with him. He didn't have a driver's license. He didn't have a vehicle. You had to go pick him up from work every day and then take him home. But he was always ready for you. He was always there. No matter what you asked him to do, he would do it. And that's who I recommended. The one guy with the wife and kids, he was not to be trusted, in my opinion. I worked with him quite a bit. He never would be on time. Sometimes he wouldn't even show up. And first, whenever he could stab you in the back, he would do it. Although he had a wife, 3 young kids at home, and was a provider for that family, I recommended him to be let go.
In that circumstances, does a seasonal agriculture worker qualify for unemployment?
It depends. Unemployment, uh, agriculture or farming operations are generally exempt from paying unemployment tax. So generally, the answer is going to be no. However, there are exceptions. If your operation pays more than $20,000 a year in wages, not a year, in a quarter, every 3 months. If your operation pays $20,000 every 3 months in wages, then yes, you do have to pay unemployment insurance, and your seasonal workers then may be eligible for unemployment insurance. And when I say they may be eligible for unemployment insurance, that goes back to some of the qualifications for unemployment insurance. Unemployment insurance, it's based on your earnings, um, going back 5 quarters from the time you file unemployment. The first four the first 4 completed quarters of the last 5 quarters, you would have to earn a certain amount of money within those 2 quarters to qualify for unemployment insurance. I know that gets a little technical and could be a little confusing to you, but if you didn't earn it, if that was your only job, was that seasonal job, and you didn't have another job, say for 6 months before that, you're probably not going to be eligible for unemployment insurance, even if your employer had to pay
Thank you. Didn't know that.
So, so anyway, layoffs are hard, especially if it's due to merit. Because right before Christmas, I'm not going to lie to you. I did not want to let that guy go with the family, having to buy Christmas presents, having to pay more money for electricity, to heat his house. And, you know, I do have a heart, guys, believe it or not. It wasn't easy, but I did go on work. Who was dependable, who would do what the job required. And that guy wouldn't.
Did you give him a severance?
No, we didn't. These were seasonal employees. They were just hired. They knew they were hired for the season. But it turned out we were in a position that we could keep one of them, but we had to let the other 3 go, or the other 2 go. So we did not get severance.
Can I jump in for just a minute?
You bet.
One issue for layoffs you got to be careful about. Dwayne is right. I completely. It's the best thing if you can make your layoff decisions based on merit. But you got to be careful that you've done the paperwork and you have paperwork to prove that Jimmy is a better worker than Sally, so the reason you're letting Sally go is because she wasn't as good a worker, and that was your decision. Because otherwise Sally could come around and say, well, the reason why you got rid of me instead of Jimmy is because you're a sexist pig, I'm suing you for sexual discrimination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You need to have records of your employees, and you need to do those personal evaluations every year. And keep those records, because otherwise it can come back to bite you at some point. But unfortunately, a lot of managers don't like to do that because they want to avoid conflict, so they just blindly tell all of their workers, oh, you're doing a good job, keep it up. You're doing a good job, keep it up. Then they don't have the grounds, they don't have the paperwork to make that merit-based decision safely. Maybe you can lay Sally off, and she's not going to sue you because she's not going to think discrimination, but maybe she is going to think it, and maybe you will get sued. So that's where, unfortunately, a lot of businesses, they just blindly, when it's layoff time, they go by seniority. So then the paperwork doesn't matter. They just say the reason we're laying off people, starting with the newest worker and climbing our way up, because then they don't have to have paperwork to justify their decision. And unfortunately, what ends up happening then is you might be letting go some good workers and stuck with some bad ones just because they happen to have been there for a while. And I've experienced that a couple times in my working career, and I've just hated every minute of it. But that's what happens when you have managers that don't take that time to do the paperwork.
And it's the same thing with age too. You know, if I kept there and then laid you off, are you gonna come back with me for age discrimination, Keith?
Well, in my experience, in my working career, the layoffs were, I guess, indirective of the business, or I should say directly related to business. They would reorganize, and all of a sudden, you might have been the whatever regional this and that, and they consolidate. Now you are the Mid-Atlantic region, and we don't need 10 of you, we just need 8 of you now due to reorganization, and your job has been eliminated. And that's how that was kind of handled. It kind of addresses what Tom's talking about, not addressing merit or seniority. They just went by and your job was eliminated.
Right. Now, what Tom, where we're kind of going with this, we've talked a lot about advantages and disadvantages of seniority-based system, or of a seniority versus merit-based system. When we hire somebody, one of the things, like on a seniority-based system, a lot of people that have that will hire overqualified people, hoping they take the time, or will take the job and then bide their time to go into upper level management throughout the year. Whereas on a merit-based system, we hire to fill that position. We don't look for promotability. We hire because we need that position filled. Now, when we think about layoffs, there's a lot to be said if we have a seniority-based system on layoffs. One, we're not going to have to worry about being sued. We have that clearly stated in our policy. So the last one hired is the first one to go.
Got another question for you.
Okay.
One, I just thought of me. Where does the Virginia right to work law come in effect during a layoff period?
Virginia right to work law is basically it's not so much for layoffs, it's the right to fire at will.
But you can,
hire somebody for whatever reason.
But we have right to work. You can fire somebody because you want to fire them, kind of thing. But you still could be, it's one thing you want to fire somebody because you don't think they're a good worker. It's one thing you want to fire them because they don't get along with the other employees. But if you're going to fire them, even though it's a right to work state, they still can say, well, the reason you fired me is not because I'm a good worker. It's because you're a sexist, racist, whatever, ageist pig kind of thing, and they end up suing you kind of thing. So they can still sue you. Maybe they'll win, maybe they won't. Maybe you have to settle out of court, but you spend a bunch of time at it. Even though it's a right to work state doesn't mean you can just sort of blindly start swinging the axe in whatever way.
Right. I can't emphasize enough, guys, you got to document everything you do.
Amen, brother.
You have to document hiring, firing, promotions, layoffs, discipline. You have to document. And those performance reviews, we'll get into that later, along with a bunch of other stuff. But documentation, guys, even raises if it's based on merit, you got to document. Uh, so with that seniority based layoff, the last hired is the first to go. Now, going back to Stewart's, I was the last man hired. I was brought on in September, brought in as in a managerial role. 2 months later, I'm sitting down saying, hey, here's who I recommend we need to lay off. You don't think I was sitting there thinking my butt's on the line as well. You know, rumors going around they was going to lay people off. I was called into that meeting. I thought that was my walking papers. I'm not going to lie to you. Because, hey, I was the last guy there. I didn't know what kind of, they didn't make their policies clear to me when I hired and I was a young kid. I didn't know. I didn't think to ask. So, that went through my head. But with seniority based, it's the last one hired is the first one to go. And, their thinking is that the more senior employees have shown loyalty, they've stayed there. It gives them a sense of security that, it's going to be a pretty big layoff if you've been there a while before I get laid off. So you have that, you're being loyal, your workers are being loyal to you, you're being loyal to your workers. The other issue or another advantage of it is those senior workers or the ones that's been there a while, it may be harder for them to find another job. When you guys, Aaron and Jasmine and Carrie and Evan, when you get to Tom's age, my age, and Keith's age, we can't help but wonder if we don't get that job, does age play an effect on it? Depending what we're applying for. So, back by that seniority-based deal, you're eliminating that. And as we said, you base it on merit. You better have good documentation because you may get sued for discrimination, whether it's age or sex or racial. They could discriminate you. They could sue you based on discrimination. You have your documentation. Hopefully you have good documentation to protect yourself. But then comes back to what we were discussing earlier. If my company's having a layoff, do I want to lay off? Do I want to keep? If I go a seniority-based deal, I may be getting rid of some of my best workers and keeping the poor performers. Although layoffs are not supposed, that's just due to lack of work. So who are we supposed to lay off? I want to keep my most productive workers personally. Personally, I would go a merit-based deal and document everything I do. I want to hire the best person for the job. If there's a promotion within my company and I know what my workers can do, I know why I hired them, I've got some flexibility. I can promote from within or I can promote from outside. If I'm seniority based, I may not be able to promote from outside or bring somebody in from the outside. I may just have to promote within. And the person next in line may or may not be capable to do that job. and we discussed that last week as a disadvantage to that seniority base. So whatever you do, make sure you document. Make sure your workers are clear on your policies. Any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. Getting back to what you just said. Say you had a seniority system in place and you had a new computerized tractor, and nobody that you currently employed knew how to operate it. So you brought a new guy in who had experience in that. Would the seniority person have a right to object or challenge that hire?
Yeah, especially if it's union. Uh, on a farm situation, I don't know how much ground they have to stand on, but you know, they do have. I think they have that right to express their displeasure. What legal action they have to take, I really don't know on that one.
I would think it would depend on, did they get an opportunity to be trained and learn the equipment? And then otherwise, this person's being hired for a different position. They're then, instead of just a general farmhand, they're going to be I don't know, more technical farmhand. They're hired to be operating that piece of equipment that nobody else can. And so that's a fundamental part of their job, in which case that puts them in a different track. Like, I'm a business teacher, we have a history teacher, so, just because we're both are teachers, we're teaching different things. So it would be the same kind of thing. So, like, the college, when we start letting people go, we're not just blindly letting the latest teachers go, or, we have to do it by department kind of thing. So I would think it would be the same situation there.
So would you be protecting yourself if you said had this new position and you announced it to the current workforce and say, I'm taking applications, and anybody would like to apply? Would that kind of protect you, doing it that way?
Well, if you have a seniority-based deal, the next person in line should have an opportunity to be trained to do that job. I think that going back to that reasonable and prudent person, as an employer, if you have a seniority-based system, you need to try, the next guy in line for that promotion.
I guess I'm confused. I guess the point
to see whether or not they could do that job.
I guess the point I'm confused on in my mind, and maybe Mr. Scales just kind of clarified it. I could see the promotion seniority for existing jobs. This would be a new job that you're creating that you normally don't have. So you'd be drawing from prospective employees from your current pool already working for you, or do you have to go outside? And if you did go outside, do the existing employees have a right for that job? I don't know if I'm asking the right question.
Well, first thing is make sure that those tasks are in the job description. So, the ability to drive such and such a tractor is in the job description, and then you can evaluate your current employees, are they qualified to do it or not, in which case it's, you've defined it's a different job. And then you can ask them, are you willing to get this training? Are you willing to learn how to do this, as far as considering them? But if you actually didn't want to go through that, you could say, well, this is the job. This is a job description. I've looked at my employees and none of y'all qualify, so I had to go elsewhere. But you probably, you would want to check with your employees, because it'd be cheaper to have somebody you already know, you already trust, and try to train them up in using the new equipment than it would be to hire an outsider, and who knows who you get and who you don't.
That leads up to my next question, pay scale. I'm sure the IT person with computer experience the market would bear a higher salary than someone who's just out as a farmhand planting and cultivating tobacco.
Well, I tell you what, if you can hold on for a few weeks, we'll talk about paid later.
Okay.
And address specialized skills compared to just general skills. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
not to put you off, but we will talk about that later. Okay, another thing, in the layoffs, the book talks about, or they mention, a bumping right policy. Now, being from the coal fields, I know what that is. You guys may not know. Basically, what a bumping right policy is if I'm to be laid off, I can say, okay, instead of laying me off, give me a demotion and lay the guy off below me. That's basically what a bumping right policy is. I can take that demotion, and the guy I replace can either be demoted or be laid off. Kind of common in union coal mines. That's the only reason I knew that. Is that good or bad in your mind? If I had Keith and Aaron working for me, and Keith was in a management position, and I was scaling back my business and was going to lay Keith off, he can say, hey, we have a bumping right policy. I'll be demoted to Aaron's job, and Aaron can be demoted or laid off if there's not a lower position for Aaron to go to. Would that be good or bad?
Well, the question I have, does the person keep the same pay grade they had at the promoted position, and when they bump back, do they go back to the lower salary?
You're going to get a lower salary. You're going to lower your pay scale with that promotion. But you're going to have a job. Aaron may not have a job, but you will.
Well, as long as I get the job, that's okay.
Aaron, you know what he thinks about you now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a happy camper, I don't think.
Yeah. Again, with whatever policy you guys implement, there's good points and bad points to it. Just make it, you got to make it clear and have it in your company policy that there is a bumping right policy, and go in detail how it works, and make sure you document everything. Again, I cannot stress that enough. Document, document, document. I've got mixed feelings about it, personally. If I was a business owner and I had to lay off somebody, because of, or get rid of a position, if they were a good worker, I wouldn't want to get rid of them. If I could demote them and they stay with me and I let somebody else go that maybe wasn't as good of a worker, that would be a good thing. But if that worker wasn't as good and the other guy was better, I definitely want that guy to go and keep the better one. Good and bad to it, like everything else. But make sure it's clear to your employees, it's in your company policy, and you document. Now, back to what Keith was talking about earlier. Do we promote from within or do we hire from outside? What's your guys' feelings on that? Do I promote within my organization or do I bring somebody new in?
I think if you have the skill set within, it's best to promote those people, because that is what you talked the other day about loyalty to the workforce and future, and kind of becoming part of the business itself instead of being a kind of a hired hand. You have a vested interest in staying there and improving your skills to better your performance and hopefully contribute to the bottom line success of the company.
Right. You know, if we think back to one of our first lectures, what do employees expect from managers? You know, one of the things that the employees expect is to increase their skills and grow over time, right? So, as an employee, you hope, you know, you go into an organization with the hope of advancement, correct? Especially if you're a broke college student, your first job, you want to, you know, you take that first job and you hope that, you know, you look that there's an advancement opportunities with time. So the thing, guys, you got to keep in mind that your policies affect your employees. Uh, it affects their hopes for advancement and productivity in the workplace. If they know they can advance and they want that promotion, they're going to work harder. When you have promotion within an organization, it encourages your employees to view that organization as career growth opportunity. So, you know, that's pretty cool. You know, I could get hired on and know that I have the hope for advancement, that I can advance my situation, both financial and work responsibilities, and grow with that company. Now, word of caution here, guys. Don't assume that that superior performance at one job is going to translate into that same success in a new position. Some people may not be able to handle that job promotion. They may not be able to handle the increased responsibilities. So they may be very successful at what they're doing, but they can't handle additional stuff. They may not excel at that promotion.
Coming from the technical side, and people get promoted into the management side, that's a hard transition for some people. And when you said that, it made me of a book I read many, many years ago called The Peter Principle, where we stop at our level of incompetence.
Right. That's true. Some people are very confident in their job and excel in it, and then they get that promotion. Now they're managing people or whatever, and their confidence is shot. You know, how do I do this? And they may not excel, or they may not have the people skills. Any wide variety of ranges. So a word of caution with that. Okay. I'm not saying do it. I'm not saying don't do it. You know, by promoting within, you know, as I just mentioned, you know, it affects your workers' abilities, their productivity, and their hopes and dreams and aspirations of growing with that company and bettering themselves. But just be aware that maybe not everybody can handle those promotions. So, what can we do? Or what's some alternatives? If we have a vacancy and we really like Bob over here, you know, we think he may be able to do it. Think we could put him in there in a temporary position to see if he could do it? Or put him in there as an interim position? Or put Sally in there? Either one?
I think probably best put him as a part-time position working with the current person that's there. Maybe that person is leaving or retiring, or maybe that person is being promoted, so that he doesn't take the job, you know, without any supervision or training.
That'd be ideal. You know, let them train with the existing person. That's not always the case. Sometimes a new position opens up, like the example you gave with a computerized tractor, or you created a new position, or somebody got sick and had to quit. You do have that option, guys, of putting somebody in there as an interim position. What that does for you as an employer, it allows you to do a thorough job search. We see that a lot in college football, don't we? You know, they get ticked off of that coach, or professional sports. They get ticked off of that coach and they put somebody in there as an interim coach while they do a thorough job search. Now, a couple things to remember if you do an interim or temporary type position. You need to make sure that person you put in there understands that. Do not mislead them under any circumstances. You can lose a good employee, and you can build resentment with the other workers. And one of the things that we have to do as employers is to gain the trust of our employees. And that's hard to do. But once we gain that trust, once we gain their trust, we don't want to lose it. And as an employer, if we screw somebody over, not only is that person that got the shaft upset, I guarantee you this, their coworkers are too. You've lost your credentials. You've lost your credibility. They're not going to trust you. And they're not going to work as hard. They're going to be worried about covering themselves. They may even be looking for other jobs. So make sure everybody's on the same page. It's only a temporary position. Now the book gives a perfect example of this. This farm had a office type position, or a manager position. I don't remember the details of it. And the person left, and they put this lady in there, and she was doing the job, and they told her it's going to be temporary. But she excelled at it. She took off. She took to that like a duck to water. And her boss commended her all the time on how well she just stepped into that role and how good of a job she was doing. She goes into work one day and meets her replacement. Think she might have been misled a little bit? Being bragged on and how good she was doing that job. Even though she might have known it was temporary, the way her boss kept bragging on her, she had the impression she was keeping that job. It was hers. And then goes into work, and there was her replacement. Think she was hurt? Yeah, she was. They just lost a good employee. So don't mislead them. And if that job's working out for that person, maybe you want to quit your job search and put that person in there. But you don't ever want to mislead them. You don't ever want to lose your trust with your employees. You can build a lot of resentment with your other workers, lose your trust. Now, let me ask you this. What if you had a promotion or a vacancy in your organization, and you promoted from within, a good worker, but that worker couldn't handle that other responsibility of that new job, and that person just was not working out in that new position. what do you do as an employer? Are you going to get rid of him and replace him? Are you going to do you have a policy that, hey, this isn't working out for you? You don't seem to be happy here. Let's go back to your old job. What's your policy on that?
Well, I think I'd even step back further and try to figure out why he's not performing to standard, because you promoted him because you thought he had the capability to do the job. Maybe he might not have the up-to-date computer skills, for example. Maybe sending him to a evening class at the community college to upgrade those skills would give him the skills to exceed at that job. And it's just making a decision to remove him or fire him from that position.
Okay. I'm glad you pointed that out, Keith. You know, when we promote from within, maybe that person doesn't have those skills to do that promotion. So it kind of lies on us as the employer to give them those skills or help them obtain those skills. Sending them to a night class or sending them for additional training. They're going to have to be trained for that job. We just can't assume that they excelled at their job. We can just throw them into this job and they'll excel. They're going to have training. Some of that responsibility falls on us as an employer. So let's keep that in mind. But say we did do the training. We did everything we were supposed to do and they didn't excel. Do we kick them back down? Do we move them out of the organization and replace them? What's going to be your policy?
Here again, going back to my experience, most people already know that, and they'll probably seek you out before you make that decision because they've had sleepless nights and their family life is suffering, and they'll come to you and say, hey, the job ain't working out for me. I want to go back to what I was doing before.
I don't disagree with you. But sometimes people's pride don't let them do that. I've seen it both ways. In fact, I was one of those. I'd gotten moved into a different position when I was with the BEC, and I hated it. I went back to my boss and said, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. Can I go back to my other job? They moved me into a different division altogether, and I did not like it. And I didn't want to do it. So,
A lot of people would, yeah, a lot of people wouldn't say anything because they're afraid if I go and tell my boss I can't do my job, then my boss may say, well, you can't do your job, you're fired. And, there's a lot of, it's not just pride, but fear too. That
Who would be a good boss? That's not a definition.
Yes, but something I can't remember, but it popped into my mind about accidents on a job, and it's kind of related to job performance in general. It's like I think it's like 90% of the accidents happen on a job is not the employee's fault. It's because the equipment wasn't there, they haven't been trained right, and that kind of stuff, and that's all manager's fault. And then the same thing goes when it comes to an employee's performance. You said it good when you said it a few minutes ago. You got to first look at yourself. Have I properly prepared this person to do this job? Have I properly equipped them to do this job? And if it's my fault, I need to fix it before I start firing somebody, because if it's my fault and then I fire that person, well, what's going to happen to the next person? They're not going to be prepared either. So you got to start by looking at yourself. And I'll shut up now and drop my mic.
Oh, that's all right. I appreciate your input. Whatever you do, make sure you got it documented. Make sure everybody knows what's going on. You've got to protect yourself. I was grateful that, I didn't, the position with me, my deal, I was part-time. I was, doing unemployment claims and helping people find jobs, that job placement deal. And this was with the Workforce Services, the Dislocated Worker Program. The guy was leaving, and my boss wanted me in there to do it, and threw me in there, and I I just did not like that. I did not like that type of work. Uh, I had my own ideas of how I would do it, but my hands were tied with state regulations, and a lot of the things I thought I just legally I just couldn't do it because of state regulations. And I had a problem with that, with my morals on that deal, because I thought some of it was a waste of money. Uh, and but either way it goes, I just didn't like it. It just wasn't for me. And he told me, he said, we're going to advertise for this position. You apply for it, you'll have it. I didn't even apply for it. He comes to me because you didn't apply for this job, and I said I don't want it. I just want my old job back. And he gave me my old job back as part time and hired somebody else. But and that part time deal worked great for me because I was training horses. I just needed some cash flow when the weather was bad. And so I worked pretty hard in the wintertime. In the summertime, my hours were cut back big time because most people were working at the time. So I could train horses most of the time and run off to horse shows on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and work a few days a week or a couple days a week. And in the wintertime, I was working close to 40 hours a week. I was allowed 1,500 hours a year. So I usually got that, most of that in the wintertime, and they scaled back my hours in the summertime, but that was fine with me between my cattle and horses. So I didn't have an issue with that. It was a great deal for me. But whatever y'all decide, just keep everything documented. Uh, Now demotions. Um, if you promote from within, um, at times you may have to demote them if they can't perform that promotion that you gave them. And we just talked about that. Are you going to let them go back to their old job? So, and I said you need to have a policy on that. You don't want to, you want to be fair to everybody. You need to protect yourself as an employer, and you need to have your productivity. So make sure, you promote from within. Make sure you give them all the training and everything, and try to figure out why they can't excel before you demote them back or move them out. And hopefully they'll come to you prior to that. Now, let me ask you this. We're running out of time. Uh, if you have a good worker, okay, and they come to you and they want a promotion, but you have nowhere to promote them, what do you do as an employer?
I give them additional responsibilities.
Okay. But Jasmine and Aaron, y'all agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Sit down and talk with them. Do they want additional responsibilities or do they just want variety? And then go from there. Uh, Two options to that, guys. You sit down, you talk with them, and you can give them more responsibilities or variety. Two terms you need to know. Job enlargement, that's horizontal loading. You're giving them more to do with the skills that that employee has. So, for example, if they're a milker, you give them more cows to milk. Uh, the other term is job enrichment, and that's referred to as vertical loading. You give them more responsibilities instead of just giving them more stuff to do, as in job enlargement or the horizontal loading. You give them more responsibilities. Say you got a cowboy out there, you know, wanting wanting a promotion, uh, give them some paperwork to do. You know, let them keep up with the animal health, record keeping. Start including them on some decisions or forage management. Other than just, you know, whatever they were doing, you know, let them be involved in, you know, give them some additional responsibilities outside of there. Add some variety in there. All right. Any questions on those two? Aaron, Jasmine, Keith, job enlargement, job enrichment.
I think we're good.
Same
All
here.
right. So those are your options. You can give them variety, give them more to do with their skills. So with that, guys, we're out of time. I think we had a good discussion today. I appreciate everybody's input. Tom, appreciate your input and your questions, Keith and Aaron and Jasmine. So um, with that, I'll let you guys go. Enjoy. Is your class right now, Tom, or is it John's on?
Yeah, no, it's mine.
Yours, okay. All right. So stretch your legs before Tom's class, and
Yep, smoke them if you got them.
Tom, I got a quick question for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
All right. On Thursday, I think I sent you an email a week ago or two about it, but I have a work conference at Virginia Tech on Thursday, so I might have to take my tests on Friday maybe.
Okay, I needed to talk to y'all about that. I'm gonna give your test to Donna Fox in the tutoring center. The lady Jessica that she's our division secretary that we were working with last semester. She's out on maternity leave, but you can actually take it in the tutoring center with Miss Fox. Do you know where the I'm not. Do you know where the tutoring center is, or the CLC?
Yeah, I do. I mean, could I take it before Thursday if I have time? If you
Um,
get to it earlier?
yes. I'll send out an email when I get it to her. I'll shoot you an email letting you know that it's there and waiting.
Okay, that's
And
fine because I just won't be here on Thursday, but I have Friday off, so I'll probably be able to do it Friday.
okay, that'll work because I'm hoping to have it done and out to the different sites here this afternoon, but we'll see. So you might be able to take it tomorrow if you were feeling froggy. Um, but yeah, it's in the tutoring center. We're gonna have to work with her for an interesting part of the semester at least. So, but okay.
all right, guys, y'all have a good rest of the day.
You too.